I knew the exact moment my career at Corivia Health was over. It was not when the human resources representative handed me a cardboard box with a cold grimace. And it was not when security escorted me out like a disgraced corporate spy carrying stolen codes. No, the rot began 6 months earlier. The exact second Julian Croft walked through the frosted glass doors, wearing a tailored vest that cost more than my first automobile and a razor-thin smile that never reached his hollow eyes. He looked as though he had been manufactured in a venture capital lab designed solely to trade engineering substance for theatrical style. My name is Brandon Vance. I am 54 years old. I do not deliver inspirational speeches or cultivate a personal brand on social media. I am the man in the back room wearing heavy headphones, writing the complex recursive loops that make clinical diagnostic systems function. 5 years of my life were poured directly into the underlying platform of Corivia Health. It was not a collective effort, despite what our sleek marketing website claims today. It was 5 years of solitary late nights spent in lines of code and clinical database trials. I built a diagnostic neural engine capable of predicting rare genetic anomalies with 99.8% accuracy before a patient ever exhibited an outward symptom. It was elegant, mathematically precise, and legally mine. Before I ever signed an employment contract with the founding board, I executed a legal maneuver that makes venture capital attorneys break into hives. I retained personal ownership of master patent, US 99482B. Corivia Health did not own the core algorithm. They merely leased it under a strict master technology license agreement. It was akin to renting a high-performance engine to put inside a standard domestic chassis. They could drive the vehicle, paint the body, and market tickets to showcase it. But if they defaulted on lease conditions or violated the covenant of good faith, I had the contractual right under Clause 14B to reach under the hood and pull my engine out. Julian Croft did not know that, or his monumental arrogance prevented him from reading fine print. He had been brought in by the venture capital board to scale the enterprise, which was corporate terminology for inflating valuation, flipping the company to the highest bidding conglomerate, and leaving the hollow shell behind. The first afternoon he toured the research facility. Smelling of expensive sandalwood cologne and aggressive optimism, he picked up a prototype sensor, tossed it into the air, and caught it with one hand. "Brandon, right?" Julian asked, observing his reflection in the high-definition monitor. "I love what you are doing in this laboratory. Granular work. But we need to think bigger. We must pivot away from clinical hardware and position ourselves as a lifestyle integration brand. This neural engine detects terminal leukemia early." "Julian," I replied, keeping my tone measured, "it is not a fitness wristband." He let out a sharp, barking laugh. "That is the scientist brain talking. You need to activate your founder mindset, Brandon. We are positioning for a massive liquidity event. Intercalics Capital is sniffing around our books with $500 million on the table. But institutional buyers require a clean narrative. Complexity frightens investment money, Brandon. Prevention saves human lives," I countered evenly. Julian stopped smiling. He fixed me with condescending pity, usually reserved for an old man trying to pay for groceries with arcade tokens. "We will refine your pitch, Brandon," he said, patting my shoulder heavily. I stepped back from his touch. "We are going to make you look like a visionary. Just trust strategic vision." Strategic vision, as it turned out over subsequent months, consisted of systematically erasing my presence from the corporate landscape. First, my name began vanishing from executive slide decks. Weekly architecture briefings, which I had led for half a decade, were rescheduled to times when I was deliberately booked for routine maintenance. I would walk past Central Glass Conference Room and witness Julian wildly gesturing at a whiteboard, where my proprietary neural loops were drawn in incorrect colors, attempting to explain my life work to venture partners who believed computer code was generated by magic. It was irritating, but I remained unbothered. I operated under assumption that I was irreplaceable technical anchor. You do not destroy foundation of a house while standing on roof. I sat in corner office nursing dark coffee that tasted like battery acid, focusing my attention on filing a continuation patent covering automated machine learning model updates. However, corporate atmosphere grew suffocatingly dense. My junior engineering team stopped making eye contact in hallways. Shared administrative calendar filled with blocked time slots labeled Private Executive Strategy. One afternoon, while retrieving creamer from break room, I found a printed internal email forgotten on counter. It was sent from Julian Croft directly to lead board members. Legacy technical personnel have become a friction point for Intercalics capital deal structure. Email read: We must streamline intellectual property narrative. I am managing Brandon Vance's situation personally. Expect full resolution prior to fourth quarter audit. The Brandon Vance situation. I was no longer chief architect who had constructed entire enterprise. I was a friction point. I was a smudge on glass of his prospective $500 million payout. I folded printed sheet into a sharp square and slid it into pocket. My hands did not shake. I do not experience panic. I perform technical analysis. If Julian Croft wished to play corporate warfare, he ought to have checked who drafted operational rules. He believed he was playing high-stakes poker, oblivious to fact that we were playing chess, and I had positioned my queen 5 years prior. I unlocked encrypted local server, opened directory containing master technology license agreement, and scrolled down to clause 14b, contractual nuclear option. Try me, Julian, I whispered to quiet room. Just try me. If you have never navigated corporate technology, let me explain mechanics of a soft lockout. It is rarely a sudden revocation of keycards. Rather, it is 1,000 paper cuts designed to drain professional authority until you become a phantom haunting your workspace. It began with digital communication channels. One Monday morning, I discovered that I had been removed from internal leadership channel. When I sent a query to Toby Miller, a 28-year-old systems administrator whom I had personally hired 3 years ago, he took 4 hours to respond. Brandon, I am sorry, Toby wrote. Julian restructured communication protocols. He stated executive decision-making needed streamlining. You have been migrated to General Technical Discussion Channel. General Technical Discussion was where entry-level employees posted memes about caffeine and inquired about spare display cables. I had been demoted from control room to storage bay without a single performance review or formal notification. When I walked through main office floor that afternoon, atmosphere was thick with ambient tension. It is a peculiar sensation when an entire floor of colleagues abruptly freezes conversations as you walk past. My engineering team, individuals whose careers I had nurtured, turned eyes toward monitors with intense concentration. Survival instinct in corporate tech is far more potent than gratitude. When chief executive begins sharpening broadaxe, nobody willingly stands near target tree. Then came incident involving Oliver Miller. Oliver was a 23-year-old junior market analyst who wore pristine vests and possessed professional depth of a shallow puddle. He was Julian Croft's newly designated special initiative lead. I was standing near automated coffee unit when Oliver bounced into room carrying sleek tablet computer. Brandon, perfect timing, Oliver chirped, oblivious to cold barrier, I maintained. I am scrubbing intellectual property disclosures for Intercalics capital due diligence binders. Julian requested all legacy attributions be made completely uniform. I noticed your individual name listed on original patent records. Can I perform a global replace to list Corivia Health as sole exclusive owner? Just to keep corporate narrative clean. My blood dropped in temperature instantly. Oliver, I said, keeping voice quiet and steady. Show me current binder presentation. He tapped screen and rotated tablet toward me. Julian included clear directive here. Oliver explained, pointing to highlighted section. Assert full corporate title. Remove founder liabilities. I examined high-resolution slide. It displayed detailed schematic of my proprietary recursive diagnostic loop. Beneath diagram, written in bold black text, was statement, wholly owned corporate property of Corivia Health, free of third-party encumbrances. Julian was not merely omitting my name from historical summaries. He was representing to an outside institutional buyer that Corivia Health held unencumbered title to my personal patent. Under explicit provisions of our agreement, Corivia Health possessed only a conditional revocable usage right. Claiming absolute corporate title to an institutional buyer like Intercalics Capital constituted undeniable material misrepresentation and direct breach of contract under federal law. That is illuminating, Oliver. I remarked evenly. Please forward complete presentation deck to my personal email address. I wish to review formatting. Certainly, Brandon, he replied, tapping tablet. Happy to assist. Poor Oliver had no comprehension of what he had just done. He had handed me exact legal evidentiary payload required to dismantle his chief executive officer. Returning to workstation, I waited for digital notification. When file arrived, I did not engage in emotional outbursts. I opened personal email client, never utilize corporate network servers when preparing a legal strike, and forwarded deck to longtime intellectual property attorney, Evelyn Cross. Evelyn was a veteran legal strategist who treated contract violations with surgical precision. My accompanying message contained 4 words. Timestamp this material breach. Evelyn replied in 3 minutes. Material breach confirmed under Clause 7 and Clause 14b. Rights of termination activated. Shall we serve revocation notice immediately? I stared at glowing cursor on screen. Not yet, I wrote back. If we revoke license today, Julian will manufacture public narrative, claiming a bitter founder is sabotaging corporate deal out of personal spite. I require him to make public declaration. I need him to stand before board of directors and lie so unequivocally that no legal retraction is possible. Let him dig hole deeper. Over next 3 days, office devolved into a theater of corporate vanity. I sat quietly in general technical sessions while junior managers discussed roadmap of my platform without offering me a chair. I watched Julian Croft strut through glass corridors, intoxicated by prospect of $500 million payout. He went so far as to purchase a heavy brass gong, placing it in central hallway. Every time financial due diligence team passed an audit checkpoint, Julian would strike gong with wooden mallet. Loud metallic reverberation echoed across floor. Gong. Legal due diligence complete. Gong. Financial audit verified. Every strike of that brass gong was another stroke of momentum, bringing corporate execution closer. He was profoundly confident, convinced an older engineer could be intimidated into quiet compliance by aggressive posturing. He mistook my silence for passive submission. He failed to comprehend that for a veteran systems architect, silence is processing power compiling code prior to execution sequence. Late on Thursday evening, Julian summoned me into corner office. Setting sun cast long amber shadows across polished mahogany desk. He did not invite me to sit down. Brandon, he began, leaning back in leather chair and lacing fingers together. We must address your transition protocol. Transition protocol? I asked, maintaining blank expression. Intercalics capital acquisition closes next week, Julian declared smoothly. Buyer requires streamlined organizational structure. Frankly, your senior salary represents unnecessary overhead. We require you to execute full release agreement, a graceful departure. We will provide 3 months of severance, provided you sign over all residual personal claims to patent portfolio to ensure immaculate paperwork. And if I refuse to execute such an agreement, I asked. Julian smiled, a cold grimace. Then we terminate your employment immediately for cause. Insubordination. Failure to adapt to strategic direction. We will entangle you in corporate litigation until you are forced to liquidate that patent of yours for pocket change. He was standing in office threatening to fire sole title owner of core technology that validated entire corporate enterprise. Structural stupidity of his position was staggering. I shall give matter proper consideration, I stated calmly. You have until all hands meeting tomorrow afternoon, Julian warned, narrowing eyes. Do not make this an unpleasant affair, Brandon. I would not dream of it, I replied, turning and walking out of office. The main executive assembly room at Corivia Health was known internally as Glass Fishbowl. It was an expansive glass-walled conference space positioned directly in center of floor plan, engineered to project corporate transparency, but functioning in practice as a stage for executive dominance. If an employee was subjected to public reprimand inside Fishbowl, 50 colleagues watched every detail through clear glass. On Friday afternoon, entire staff was assembled around perimeter of Fishbowl for mandatory strategic alignment briefing. Julian Croft stood at head of conference table, flanked by lead members of board of directors, including Roger Thorne, principal venture capital partner. Roger and fellow board members looked like polished hawks in expensive business attire, hovering over catered trays, eager to formalize prospective acquisition. Julian was practically vibrating with adrenaline. He projected unrestrained enthusiasm of an executive who believed he was moments away from cementing corporate legacy. I stood near rear glass wall, resting weight casually against structural pillar. I wore customary dark trousers, tailored dark jacket, and leather boots. I was not dressed for celebration, but I was fully prepared for demolition. Team Carivia, Julian began, voice carrying through acoustic space without amplification. We stand today at threshold of transformation. Intercalics Capital has validated what I have asserted for 6 months. Carivia Health is not merely a medical tech firm. It is a fundamental paradigm shift. A brief burst of applause erupted from marketing leads. Senior technical colleagues maintained eye contact with floor. They recognized technology was immaculate, but recognized Julian's public narrative was theatrical window dressing built on top of my sweat. To reach this peak, Julian continued, pacing perimeter of room, we were required to make difficult operational decisions. We had to eliminate inefficiency. We had to transition away from research mindset into aggressive execution framework. He stopped pacing abruptly. He turned body with deliberate slowness until facing me directly across room. Ambient chatter vanished instantly. Air inside glass fishbowl seemed to lose volume. Brandon, Julian said, voice dropping into a rehearsed tone of solemn disappointment. You have been with this organization since inception. You drafted original software algorithms, and for that foundation, board expresses gratitude. He paused dramatically, allowing silence to settle. However, Julian declared, what got us to this initial stage will not carry us to summit. We require strategic visionaries, not merely technical programmers. We require leaders who understand an algorithm possesses zero economic value if it cannot be monetized at scale. You have exhibited continuous resistance. You have clung to obsolete operational models. You think like a solitary lab researcher rather than an executive in corporate arena. My face remained completely immobile, a wall of cold granite. Let him complete statement on record, I thought. Let every word be captured by witnesses present. We extended a generous transition package to you, Julian continued, uttering a blatant lie before 50 assembled staff members and entire board of directors. You rejected our offer. You threatened to hold corporate entity hostage over minor technicalities. Therefore, he straightened shirt cuffs, effective, immediately. Brandon Vance, your employment with Carivia Health is terminated for cause. Security will escort you from premises. He gestured toward glass doors, where 2 large security guards were already positioned. Visual sequence had been rehearsed. Julian desired a dramatic spectacle. Old technical guard physically removed to demonstrate absolute corporate authority to board. I looked at Roger Thorne and board members. They observed scene with passive indifference. They cared nothing for identity of architect, so long as $500 million sale proceeded on schedule. I looked at Oliver Miller, who appeared physically sick, and Toby Miller, who gave me an imperceptible nod of understanding. I stepped away from structural pillar. I did not raise voice. I did not engage in an emotional outburst. You are committing a catastrophic operational error, Julian, I said. My voice was quiet, yet in absolute silence of glass room. It resonated with razor-sharp clarity. The only error, Julian sneered, stepping closer, was retaining your services for this long. Your patent is corporate property, Brandon. Read your contract. Now remove yourself from this building. Read your contract. Irony was so profound, it bordered on comedy. I picked up leather briefcase, walked past table of board members, and past Julian without giving him a second glance. He was already turning back to room, dismissing me like a minor annoyance. I walked out of glass fishbowl, across open floor, where I had invested 5 years of my life, and approached elevator bank. As metallic doors slid shut, I observed Julian raising a champagne glass to toast board. He believed battle was concluded. He believed he had secured total victory. I retrieved mobile device, unlocked encrypted communication line to Evelyn Cross, and transmitted a short message, termination executed publicly for cause. Absolute assertion of patent title made in presence of board and staff. Evelyn replied immediately, legal trap is closed. Executing formal revocation notice. 24-hour statutory clock is running. I walked out of corporate tower into bright afternoon sunlight, drew a deep breath of fresh air, and waited for legal machinery to operate. There is a specific category of silence that follows a heavy detonation. It is quiet while shockwave expands across landscape before physical debris impacts ground. That described my existence for subsequent 24 hours. I returned to private residence in Marina District. It was a disciplined, minimalist space filled with clean architecture and a small server rack and utility room that hummed like a quiet engine. I did not activate television. I did not check corporate social media updates where Julian's public relations team was undoubtedly publishing polished announcements regarding corporate leadership optimization. Instead, I brewed fresh black coffee, sat on balcony, watching fog drift across bay, and reviewed formal legal notice that Evelyn Cross had served directly upon Corrivia Health's general counsel at precisely 11 o'clock in the morning. Subject: urgent notice of license revocation and immediate cease-desist order. To General Counsel, Corrivia Health, Inc. CC, Board of Directors, Intercalics Capital Due Diligence Committee. Pursuant to Clause 14B and Clause 12 of Master Technology License Agreement, licensor Brandon Vance hereby exercises absolute contractual right to revoke all usage rights, operational access, and commercial licenses pertaining to Master Patent US 99,482B, effective exactly 24 hours from receipt of this notice. This revocation is triggered by material breach of contract, specifically 1. Fraudulent public assertions of corporate ownership over personal patent property. 2. Unlawful termination of founding architect without cause, in violation of founder protection covenants. As of 11 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, Corrivia Health must immediately terminate all operational deployment of diagnostic engine. Continued utilization will constitute willful patent infringement under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271. It was a total legal shutdown. Julian would not comprehend it immediately. He was far too occupied celebrating with venture partners. General Counsel, a harried attorney named Marcus Vance, no relation to my family, would initially assume it was a desperate negotiation ploy from a departed employee. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, phone began vibrating. It was not Julian. His pride prevented him from reaching out directly. It was Marcus Vance. "Brandon," Marcus said, tone strained and tight. "We received a highly concerning document from your attorney." "Good afternoon, Marcus," I replied, taking a sip of coffee. "You are referring to license revocation notice. Listen to me, Brandon. Let us not act rashly," Marcus urged, attempting a tone of professional composure that failed to hide underlying panic. Julian was agitated during meeting. "We can reclassify your departure as mutual separation. We can significantly enhance financial severance package. Revoking technology license is a nuclear action. You are destroying enterprise value of Corrivia Health. Corrivia Health possesses zero enterprise value without my intellectual property, Marcus." I responded calmly. Julian made that abundantly clear yesterday when he informed organization that my personal patent was corporate property. Since he appears utterly confused regarding legal title, I am merely restoring contractual clarity. "Brandon, be reasonable," Marcus pleaded. "Intercalics Capital is scheduled to execute final wire transfer on Monday morning. If this legal cloud hangs over core technology, they will terminate transaction. That represents an operational crisis for Julian Croft, not an issue for Brandon Vance," I stated. "You have 19 hours remaining." I terminated call and blocked Marcus's number. Within 10 minutes, Julian Croft's name flashed across display. He called 5 times in rapid succession. I permitted every call to proceed directly to voicemail. I pictured him standing in executive suite, tie loosened, sweat glistening on forehead, staring at phone in disbelief. He was accustomed to intimidating subordinates until they surrendered. He failed to understand that he possessed nothing I desired. I owned patent, I retained personal dignity, and I held absolute legal advantage. The following morning at 9:30, phone rang from an unlisted number originating in Palo Alto. "Is this Brandon Vance?" a crisp, authoritative voice inquired. "It is," I replied. "My name is Winston Drake, lead counsel for Intercalics Capital," attorney stated. His tone was cold, precise, and devoid of emotional noise. "We have received formal legal disclosure regarding intellectual property title of Corrivia Diagnostic Platform. Do you have a moment to clarify status?" "For you, Winston, I have ample time, I said. Let me verify operational facts. Winston continued, sound of legal documents shifting in background. You are sole named inventor and title holder of master patent, US 99482B. You executed a conditional license to Corivia Health 5 years ago. Yesterday, Chief Executive Officer terminated your employment and asserted absolute corporate ownership in presence of witnesses. That statement of facts is completely accurate, I confirmed. He also violated explicit founder protection covenants under Clause 12. My legal counsel has secured sworn affidavits from attendees. I see, Winston said. Prolonged pause followed, and formal revocation of usage rights becomes effective. In precisely 87 minutes, I noted, checking watch. At 11 o'clock sharp, Mr. Vance, Winston said, tone shifting into profound professional respect. Intercalics Capital was prepared to transfer $500 million based upon explicit representation that Corivia Health held clear unencumbered title to this diagnostic technology. If your license is revoked, we are effectively purchasing an expensive office lease and used furniture. I am fully aware, Winston, I replied. Without my proprietary algorithm, diagnostic hardware is merely a collection of silent electronic sensors. Why was this legal structure omitted from primary due diligence binder? Winston asked. Because Julian Croft believed that if he ignored a contract with sufficient arrogance, legal reality would cease to exist, I explained. He gambled that I would not dismantle deal because I held minor equity. He forgot that I care infinitely more about integrity of my invention than his corporate payout. Understood, Winston stated cleanly. Thank you for absolute candor. I must execute several urgent communications. While I finished coffee, events at Corivia Health headquarters reached catastrophic climax. Toby Miller provided continuous text updates from server room. Toby, Marcus just ran into Julian's office with face completely white. Toby, Julian is shouting at legal team, trying to find contractual loophole. Toby, Intercalics legal auditors just walked into glass fishbowl. They look furious. I could picture scene with absolute clarity. Institutional buyers entering glass fishbowl, Julian attempting to project slick charisma while sweating through shirt, and legal traps springing shut. At 10:55 in the morning, Julian called my personal number from unlisted line. I answered. Brandon, Julian gasped, voice ragged. Thank God. Listen to me, I have spoken with board. We can fix this immediately. We can reinstate your title. Operational window is closed, Julian, I stated. You cannot do this, he screamed, losing emotional control. You are destroying $500 million. Think of your equity. I do not care about equity in a firm that attempted to misappropriate my life work, I replied. I did not misappropriate it. I was positioning it for market liquidity, Julian yelled. You do not understand high-level corporate business. You do not understand federal statutory patent law under Title 35 of the United States Code. Section 271. I responded with absolute ice in my voice. You publicly terminated title holder. You asserted fraudulent ownership. License revocation is automatic under Clause 14b. It is not a negotiation. I will make you Chief Technology Officer, he pleaded desperately. Right now, full executive authority. Just contact Winston Drake and state that license remains valid. I have no desire to work for an individual of your character, Julian, I said. I never wish to see your face again. I terminated call. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. Statutory deadline had arrived. I was not physically present inside glass fishbowl when corporate execution occurred, but through sworn legal depositions and eyewitness testimony from Toby Miller, precise sequence of events is preserved in absolute clarity. At 11:15 in the morning, full board of directors was seated opposite senior legal team from Intercalics Capital. Julian Croft sat at head of mahogany table, attempting to project steady confidence, though hands trembled visibly. Winston Drake stood up. He did not open digital presentation deck. He held a single sheet of paper. Gentlemen of board, Winston announced, voice slicing through room. Intercalics Capital is terminating acquisition process of Corivia Health immediately for cause. Room exploded into chaos. Roger Thorne, principal venture partner, stood up so fast his leather chair hit glass wall. Terminating? We are at final execution stage. Acquisition funds are held in escrow. Funds are frozen, Winston corrected coldly. We have received formal notification from sole patent holder, Brandon Vance, that master technology license has been revoked due to material breach of contract and executive fraud. Julian slammed fists onto table. He is bluffing. It is a low-level negotiation tactic. Corivia Health owns that intellectual property. I assured you of this. Winston turned gaze toward Julian with clinical detachment. Mr. Croft, we have reviewed original master technology license agreement, specifically Clause 12 and Clause 14b. It states unambiguously that if licensor is terminated without cause, or if licensee falsely asserts ownership, license becomes voidable upon 24 hours notice. That notice was executed yesterday at 11 in the morning. As of 15 minutes ago, Corivia Health is operating an unlicensed medical diagnostic system. Every test your staff runs constitutes active patent infringement under federal law. You are attempting to sell stolen technology. Entire board turned to stare at Julian Croft. Air inside glass room turned arctic. Julian, Roger Thorne whispered, voice trembling with rage. Did you fire sole title holder of patent? I streamlined technical operations, Julian stammered, charismatic facade disintegrating completely. He was uncooperative. He was not a team player. I did not anticipate that he would actually. You did not think, Roger roared, cutting him off entirely. You informed this board that intellectual property title was absolute. You stated founder was fully aligned. Furthermore, Winston Drake added, adjusting jacket, technical audit confirms diagnostic platform requires a security key held exclusively by Brandon Vance to perform system updates. Without his key, software degrades within months. Unless you persuade Mr. Vance to return to this room, forgive your conduct, and execute a new license, this corporate entity possesses a net valuation of 0. You face imminent insolvency due to prospective shareholder lawsuits. Roger Thorne looked at Julian with pure venom. Get out of this room, Julian Roger. Please, Julian gasped. You are terminated immediately for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty under Delaware General Corporation Law, Section 141, Roger declared. Security. Escort Mr. Croft from premises immediately. Very security guards Julian had hired to publicly humiliate me 2 days prior stepped forward, seized Julian by arms, and physically removed him from glass fishbowl while 50 staff members watched in absolute shock. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, formal communications began arriving in my personal inbox. Not from Julian, who was reportedly drinking heavily at a hotel bar, but from Roger Thorne and board subject. Urgent board communication reinstatement proposal. Brandon. Misunderstanding regarding your corporate status. Julian Croft has been removed from all executive duties. Board wishes to offer you Chief Executive Officer position, $2 million signing bonus, and 30% equity to reactivate master license. I read proposal and let out a quiet laugh. A misunderstanding. Corporate euphemism for getting caught in an ironclad legal trap. I permitted them to wait in agony for 3 days, while Corivia Health's private valuation collapsed to 0, and key engineers resigned en masse. On Tuesday afternoon, I agreed to meet Roger Thorne at a quiet cafe in Mission District. Roger looked as though he had aged a decade. He placed a thick leather folder on table. You have won, Brandon, Roger stated quietly. This is a complete asset transfer agreement. Corivia Health surrenders all claims to diagnostic platform, hardware designs, and laboratory assets, transferring them directly to your personal holding company. In exchange, you agree to drop formal, statutory patent infringement claims. And Julian Croft? I asked. Julian is facing multiple shareholder lawsuits for breach of fiduciary duty, Roger replied bitterly. His executive career in this industry is permanently destroyed. I signed legal documents cleanly. Pleasure doing business with you, Roger, I said. He observed me with a mixture of fear and profound respect. Julian informed us you were merely a quiet old engineer, Roger admitted. He claimed you lacked instinct for high-stakes business. Julian confused professional business with superficial bullying, I replied. Science is governed by absolute physical laws, cause and effect. He simply forgot that actions carry contractual consequences. There was one final technical detail that Julian Croft never comprehended, a detail that rendered his entire strategy fundamentally doomed from inception. 2 months prior to his attempts to marginalize me, I had filed an independent continuation patent covering an automated feedback loop that prevented algorithmic drift over time. That continuation patent was developed entirely on my private servers during non-work hours, fully protected under a specific exclusion clause in my original employment contract. Even if Julian had succeeded in stealing primary patent, system would have degraded to 85% accuracy within 6 months without my secondary update. He was attempting to sell a perpetual motion machine, entirely ignorant of fact that I held only key capable of keeping engine running. 1 week later, I returned to Corrivia Health Facility one final time to retrieve personal belongings. Corporate floor was deserted. Promotional posters were peeling from walls. In central hallway, Julian's brass gong sat silent and forgotten in a corner. I walked past glass fishbowl. Inside, Julian Croft was packing personal effects into a cardboard box under watchful eye of security guard. He looked broken, expensive suit wrinkled, eyes hollow with defeat. He looked up and noticed me through clear glass wall. For a moment our eyes met. He mouthed something behind glass, perhaps an apology, perhaps a curse. It was irrelevant. Acoustic insulation of glass prevented any sound from reaching me. I did not gloat. I did not gesture. I simply took a sip of coffee, adjusted leather briefcase, and walked toward exit. Outside, California's sun was bright and clear. My phone buzzed with text from Toby Miller. Migration of core databases to our new independent server infrastructure is complete. Standing by for your command, Chief Architect. I typed back a single word, execute. I entered my automobile, started precision-engineered engine, and pulled out into afternoon traffic. Real power does not require loud proclamations or executive titles. Real power resides in holding absolute keys to foundation.